So I want to thank everybody for coming. So this is what we're going to talk about. I didn't ask last time, but maybe I will this time. How many of you, well, just with regards to this, how many of you have lived here since before Villebois? See, quite a few people. So that's good. That's about half and half. And so you will know a lot, probably a lot, close to what I know. And I will say that this program it doesn't have as many pictures, and I've never done it before. The other programs I've done multiple times, but this one I haven't done before. I just was throwing it up today. I have therefore brought my assistant, Mr. Greg Leo, who was our lobbyist and legislative consultant through all of these legislative sessions and just did a fabulous job for us. I also want to introduce our current mayor, Julie Fitzgerald. There she was. And a city councilor, Katie Dunwell, is right here, one of our newest ones. And I don't see anyone else, any other electeds here. I missed Carol in the last time because I didn't know she was there in the back. And Julie Satter, who is with the Prison Advisory Committee and has been since 1999 on the Prison Advisory Committee. And so she will be able to raise her hand every time I do something that's not right, that's wrong, because she probably knows more about this subject than I do. So before we get into this, I had this picture up. This is my, before I was talking about, I do my, usually on history presentations, talk about what is history and what is mythology and et cetera, and how you need to question everything you see or hear, including me or him, and put it together. So I wanted to, so I'm not going to do that again, but this is just a demonstration of a photograph. So this is the cherry picnic picture in what is now my side yard. The house burned down in '44, but this is 1918. And there are many clues in this to what is going on. And you should look at a picture like this and ask, why are all those old men sitting in chairs, not with their wife or whoever? And why are all those women in white? And what's with the picture back there? And actually, when I got it, it just said cherry picnic. It said cherry picnic, and it didn't even have the date. So anyway, the old guys. So this is Wilsonville. These are all Wilsonville people. These are a bunch of GAR veterans. They're all sitting here wearing their medals. And they're with the Grand Army of the Republic. They are Union soldiers from the Civil War, all the way along there. The surviving ones in the community. What was the other one? Oh, any old picture. If you want to try to figure out the date, you look for the baby or the youngest person in there. You look for children because you can guess that this infant here is, who is right there, is less than a year old. So, and you know it's cherry season, so it's June, and it's June when this baby is. So if we know this baby, we know the date. But there are other ways we could find out the date of this picture, but I know it because this is my mother. And she was born in April, and so she's a young baby in June. And furthermore, I know that that's her 3-year-old brother, Hardy Young, who owned the Silverleaf, if you're that old, but who's sitting down there in the front. But most importantly, in the back, in the window, are posted these things. And somebody already said, well, that's the Red Cross. And that's these women in white are all part of the Women's Relief Fund of what? World War I. And the 2 stars that are in the window mean they have 2 sons at war. And one of whom is my grandfather. And I think this is a rotary thing, if I looked at it up closer, something like that. And these are, I did finally find these, they have something to do with the war also. I think they're like a bond or something like that. They are on the internet. If you look hard enough, you can find them. But anyway, I was just want to say there's a lot going on in a picture like this. And I will say something more about my grandfather who is missing. That's the other thing. There aren't very many young men in this picture. There's old men and a lot of women. So a lot of them were at war. Both of the sons of this family were in France at the time. And and we had women from Wilsonville who served in France in World War I as well. But that's not really the topic we were here for. So, major milestones in Wilsonville. We already did the low bank Willamette, the steamboats, all the transportation stuff, the coming of Dammasch State Hospital. So we're going to kind of start with incorporation and Charbonneau, which, as you know, incorporation didn't happen until 69, 70 in there. And then there was the closure of Dammasch and the prison Villebois battle. The water treatment plant we will save till the next time, but it's right on the heels of those things and in many ways integrally involved in the prison in Villebois. But first with incorporation, and I asked the question, why is it so late? Why were we so late to incorporate? And I don't really know the answer to that. I'm waiting for some good historians to do some more digging. But most of the towns around here, not Butteville, because they never incorporated, but most of them incorporated like in the 1800s and or by 1905 or something. Tualatin, Sherwood, Canby, etc. Wilsonville sitting here unincorporated until the late 1960s. But it's not like somebody just got the bright idea one day, we should incorporate. So there was a lot going on, and I'm going to just mention one person. And I don't usually mention this person because he's a relative of mine, but his contributions come up all over the place, and because he had his fingers in everything. And this is my grandfather. Can't see the picture very well. Doris Shelby Young everyone knew him by Cy. And, but that's his picture when he graduated from Oregon Agricultural College in 1911. He was born and raised in Wilsonville. He graduated from college in 1911 at the age of 20. Of course, this is how I mostly remember him. He was always in overalls. The little thing down there is a Jupes Pal, which is a sprinkler that he designed, invented, and manufactured in Wilsonville. But he was always coming up with an idea or something. So I just want to say, besides, as soon as he came home from college, he put in the first septic tank in the area. He was part of organizing the Wilsonville Shipping Company along with the Seeleys and I believe the Beckmans, but to ship mostly nuts but other produce by rail out of Wilsonville. He designed and marketed Jupes Pal sprinklers, manufactured them here. He built the Young Electric Company, which supplied electricity to 250 customers in Wilsonville before PGE was serving the area. This was before rural electrification. He had an electric plant down on Coffee Creek. that ran on diesel for the dry months, the 3 or 4 dry months, and ran on water power the rest of the time. He's the one who recruited Bill Lowry to come here from Hubbard to rent grocery space next to the railroad track while he built my grandfather, Cy Young, built the first shopping center there, which then later, some years later, Bill Lowry purchased. But he also was running the Wilsonville Water Company. So he was providing water to the Wilsonville Grade School, to the shopping center, and much of Old Town. And then at the close, I'd mentioned this without mentioning his name before, when Old Town started to dry up, when the freeway opened, he was Johnny on the spot trying to recruit Dammasch, trying to aggregate properties to put together 500 acres, which is what the state was looking for. And then he was out trying to get the state to come here to build Dammasch. And he did a whole bunch of other land deals I can't even remember, except he had his finger in something or other. But he was a big part of bringing Wilsonville Concrete and Bernard Towing here. He was always a lifelong farmer, but always pitching a new idea. Some of them worked out, some of them didn't, but a lot of them had to do with municipal service, electricity and water and and septic and etc. It was, you need these things for us to be a real town, and so there we go. But so then we land Dammasch, and Dammasch is a self-contained thing. They had their own sewage treatment plant on Mill Creek. They had 2 deep water wells, the 700-foot deep wells, their own steam plant that provided the heat to the buildings. It was pretty self-contained. But in the next 10 years, between 1960 and 1970, Wilsonville gradually is growing, partly because Dammasch is here. It's bringing a lot of comings and goings of employees and employees who are purchasing things at the stores. So we start having more stores and things like that. And our infrastructure was lagging. The Wilsonville Water Company was not able to manage. So the fortunate thing or unfortunate thing from a land use perspective, you know, Charbonneau should never have been built on the south side of the Willamette. But, and if you're not oriented here, this is Charbonneau here. It's just starting construction at this end. This is a 1971, I think, picture. But what else? Oh, and what's happening at the exact same time? Does everybody know what this is? The sewage treatment plant. A sewage treatment plant right where it is now. It keeps getting bigger, but it's kind of constrained at this point, but it's stuck here next to I-5. So these two things happen together, and they kind of, I always refer to this as a chicken and egg situation, but you know, one couldn't go without the other. The city needed the revenue from all those development fees coming in order to do that sewage treatment plant, and Charbonneau couldn't go forward without a sewage treatment plant. So they are tied, and I don't know who to ask about how they were tied exactly, but they both are happening right here in the same time. Obviously, this is under construction, and this has just started construction, but they're inextricably linked, our incorporation and Charbonneau. So while it was a bad idea, land use-wise, to put that kind of development south of the Willamette, the good part about it was then all these people in Charbonneau became protectors of farmland south of them. So I don't know if they had not, it probably things would have leaked out all over the place. Who knows? But there it is, whatever happened. So by 88, we are, this is just the west side of Wilsonville. By 88, we're incorporated for a while, and you can see where Dammasch is. Here's Dammasch, now Villebois. That's a huge development for us, but we were just poking along. We already had Rite Aid, Coca-Cola. On the other side, we had Tektronix and Mentor Graphics, and some of the tech center was going for sure. No water treatment plant, nothing like that, no. So that's kind of where that was. And then here's Charbonneau at almost at completion. So an interesting thing about that is that Charbonneau is still under construction a little bit here and a little bit over here, but it was pretty much exactly 20 years till they were at 98, 9% build out. Same as Villebois. I mean, Villebois is just closing in on the 20 years. I mean, 20 years this year, because groundbreaking for Villebois was in 2003. So as they take 20 years to do something that size. Okay, now, like I say, things were just kind of puttering along. We had a sewage treatment plant, wastewater, so say wastewater treatment plant, and we had 8 wells that were serving us, or we had 6 wells, and then later we had added a 7th and an 8th, whatever, a bunch of wells. But it wasn't stopping our development until close to this time, and wait a second. The closure of Dammasch was pushed partly by their sewage treatment plant was failing, and they were under DEQ orders to stop. And so Dammasch had shifted off of their sewage treatment plant, which emptied into Mill Creek, which is over there on the Graham Oaks. And the creek wasn't large enough to take that effluent. But the other issue bearing down on us was that our wells we were under notice from the Water Resource Division in the state of Oregon that they wouldn't let us. They would let us drill one more well, and that was it. And because we didn't believe it, but they said we were drawing down all these wells for miles around, and so we had just annexed Dammasch in 91, 92, and by 93 or first part of 94, we get notice that they are planning to close. So I think they knew that beforehand, but that it was going to close. When this picture was taken, it was closed. This picture is looking south across the field. You can see these are the water towers, the steam plant, the staff housing all through here. And this is where Boone's Ferry Primary is. Wood School, or at least an early version of Wood School, is here. But we were in the midst of a fight already there. Now, see, I really do need to turn the lights down a little bit. Can we turn the lights down just or I can't follow.
10 seconds or something like that.
Well, you don't need to see me. You just turn them off for a second. I'll run through here until I can pass it to my assistant. In 94, so they announced the closure, and we are suddenly nervous. The city is nervous. Mostly Arlene Lobel, the city manager, was nervous. They didn't tell us they were going to close it, and now, when they could have, and now they're closing it, and they've got something in mind. So we need to get a plan going before they can come at us with a different plan. And we applied for and received a $100,000 grant from ODOT to do the Dammasch Area Master Plan, and that panel included a bunch of staff, of Wilsonville staff. I was the representative as a city councilor. I was representing the electeds because I wasn't mayor yet. There were representatives from Metro, from ODOT, from the Mental Health Division, from Department of Administrative Services, and it was managed by David Leland, who was working for David Evans and Associates. And so a lot of state agencies had a hand in doing this plan. The last patients leave in 95, and in October 96, when we're getting ready to present our Dammasch area plan, which I have a copy of over there on the table if you want to take a look at it. We received word from the governor's office that they've decided to put the women's prison there. Now, of course, we thought there must be some misunderstanding because look at all of these state agencies were there. None of them had a clue. They're spending their money, and all these agencies they're sitting around the table working on this plan with us. Anyway, we hurried up and finished the master plan by January of 97, shortly after which there was a hearing about the prison siting, and we had like hundreds and hundreds of citizens turn up at Wilsonville High School, which had just opened in 95, by the way, in the gymnasium. So we barely fit in the gymnasium. And then the battles shifted to the legislature and to the legislative session of 1997. They went through that session, through the following summer E-Board, and then through the 99 session. So I'm going to let Mr. Leo, at least we could turn it up so you can take a picture of him, and and mention about the 97.
Thank you. I'm Greg Leo. I'm your legislative consultant. I work with the city of Wilsonville, and I have since 1997. Anybody in the audience a member of ORPS? Yes, there is an ORPS person. That's the Oregonians for Responsible Prison Siting, which was a community group that organized around this issue.
And I have one of their papers over here also.
Yes, we have an ORPS paper. Originally, grassroots, the opposition to the prison really snowballed. And we, as a community, pulled together and said, no, we don't want this prison here in Wilsonville. Why was the prison coming here? Basically because the people in Salem, a lot of the community leaders, legislators said, hey, we already have the state prison, the state hospital. We have the women's prison down there at that time. We've had enough prisons. Let's spread them around the state. So we had a big legislative fight in our hands. 1997 session, 1998, and up until about 1999, when finally we were able to negotiate, pressure, log roll, and generally lobby to get the prison moved from the Dammasch site over to the Coffee Creek site. How that happened is kind of an interesting legislative story in itself. It really, we lobbied very hard. We worked with other communities. We worked with Hermiston, for example, to get the prison up there. We worked with people in Scappoose. There were other communities in the state that wanted them, but corrections really wanted it close to Portland, but not in Salem. And I think the reason was they wanted medical staff. This wasn't just the women's prison. This was the intake for all of the state prison system. So when the corrections department is processing people in, they do medical and psychological evaluations. the argument was we need to be close to Portland because that's where the people we need live. And so it was a heck of a fight. We organized citizens like yourselves, came to Salem, testified in hearings, met with legislators, and we pretty well fought the prison, I would think, almost to a standstill, but yet Governor John Kitzhaber persisted. And we had a famous T-shirt made that many Wilsonville people might have in a closet someplace. They gave the 10 reasons why, 10 reasons that Governor Kitzhaber is using for prison siding, like has to be near neighborhoods, has to put your community, at risk, has to not have water, some of this was tongue-in-cheek and some of this was political theater. But the thing was, Wilsonville was a very prickly porcupine when it came to this issue. And so eventually the governor put his foot down and said, this is going to be it. So I was lobbying for the city. I was at the emergency board, and then our timeline.
In the summer of 98.
Summer of 98.
98, yeah.
And we were offered a fait accompli. It was, Wilsonville will take the prison, but you get to decide where in Wilsonville. So we had made enough of a case that here was this beautiful hillside, this hilltop that had a great view of Mount Hood. The city had a strong jobs housing imbalance. We needed to build more housing in Wilsonville. And we had the Dammasch Area Master Plan, which thanks to Charlotte, you and the council and Arlene, we actually had a great plan for what would eventually become Villebois, which was great. So anyhow, went to the emergency board. The senior Republican, Senator Gene Durfler of Salem, comes out and says, Greg, hey, we did our best. We fought this thing, but you're going to have to take the prison in Wilsonville. But you get to pick where. That's the good news. The bad news is you have to tell us by tomorrow. So
yeah.
I don't know that we had thought where this prison should go up until that point. So
well, let me throw one other
from there.
Well, no, you don't have to sit down yet.
Go ahead.
But one other thing is we had said from the get-go we're out of water. You should know the Department of Water Resources has restricted us. We can't supply you with water. We're out of water. In the middle of that first legislative session, we get this letter out of the blue from Tualatin saying that they would supply the water. They would wheel the water down through their system to Dammasch, and so that they would have water. Well, now the Department of Corrections relied on that as the way to say they don't have to pay any attention to Wilsonville's water issue because Tualatin will be supplying them with the water. This becomes important later on when Tualatin is fighting us.
The thing about that water, though, is that is Bull Run water. That comes off of, the west side of Mount Hood, goes through the city of Portland, goes through the suburbs. We're literally at the end of the pipe. And sometimes Bull Run water gets interrupted. And so we didn't think really a very good source of water.
It wasn't Tualatin's to give, for one thing. And
from our point of view, it was really a bluff because we didn't really think they had the water. And frankly, they didn't. They didn't have the water. Yeah. So we were not taking no for an answer here. I mean, we're not taking yes for an answer on the prison. We wanted the prison to go to Hermiston or Scappoose.
So when we were looking for that site in those 24 hours, and we have Mr. Leo and 5 or 6 other staff people out there as the sun is going down, trying to get pictures, and the staff at City Hall are going over aerial photos and where could it be and what would this work or would that work.
So Arlene Lobel says, what about up here around Coffee Creek? And when they were looking at the aerial photos and they saw these really tiny dots. It was almost like somebody had taken a pen and kind of made the marks and what are these little round dots
What's
here?
going on over here?
It was like, okay, Leo, at first light, get out there. I think Chris Niemsu,
he ran out of light.
The city, he went out as well. We figured out that those little dots were illegally stored tires that somebody, I shouldn't mention any names, but on their property were like, there was tires, there was old, rusty barrels, there were things that should not have been.
There were a lot of
out
sketchy things going on out there. This is on either side of the railroad track of
Yeah, so all of a sudden, this wasn't just
outside
about
the city.
finding the prison, it was also to some degree about cleaning up a brownfield site that, a place where there was some things. So eventually, I went back the next day. I said, we found a site. We think it'll work. It's near Coffee Creek. It's off Day Road. And that's really kind of when the fun began.
Yeah.
So do you want to take it from there and then?
Yeah, let me see.
Then I can jump back
Okay,
in. 'Cause after we picked Day Road, the plot thickened.
Yeah. Boy, did it ever. Because now all of a sudden, Tualatin, who thought that it would be wonderful to have a prison down there at Dammasch, if they were wheeling the water through, they are all Twitter-pated about that, about it being at Day Road. And so they hold a big hearing at the Tualatin High School. And they're mad as hornets up there, even though they're like a mile and a half away from the Day Road site, and the Day Road site is surrounded by industrial. Do I have that on here? No. Wait a second. Yeah. So if you are looking at, this is the 2019 map, of course, but this is the prison at Day Road. All of this blue is industrial. And this was the case we were making from the beginning, was we're not saying no to a prison. We just can't put a prison here on our last piece of good residential at the time. Now we're over in Frog Pond. But as you can see, Wilsonville was always planned pretty well. Even though we came very late to the planning situation, much later than the cities around us, I think we are better laid out. So they planned for a lot of industrial, but the residential is down here, and that means it's not just what's next to you, it's what's nearby in this area. So it's partly where the parks are, where the grocery stores are, the personal services are, the schools, the churches, everything is in the lower end. It's not up here. And that's a benefit also for the prison, because the prison, and when they initially considered, I think gave it only a cursory look, and said, no, we looked at it, it's no good, we're sticking with Dammasch. That's when, on my previous list there, I said the city, the Chamber of Commerce, the community members, we went into full schmooze mode with the Department of Corrections.
And Charlie, if I might just point out, so we ask the question sometimes, what makes Wilsonville so great? And, we all have our own reasons, but I just wanted to point out, and I think I learned this from you, is we're in quadrants here, and we don't mix residential and industrial. We have this quadrant up here that really is, industrial, and then we have our residential and our commercial areas. So this separation is something we had to fight for later when there was a plan to put industrial over in Frog Pond.
This was going to be
which would have taken all of the big semi-trucks down past the high school, which we fought to stop. So when we say, why is this such a great place to live? We had an empty palette to work with. When this town developed, it developed along the lines of best planning principles. And that's one of the reasons why it's such a great place to live.
Now, some of these, like this, we wouldn't have done, but this is Wilsonville concrete, and they predate the city. So they were already there. And I don't know about ORPAC when they came in, but sometime fairly early. And the green ones here are public. They're not necessarily parks. So they're parks and schools, and this is the prison, and this is a substation. So again, very compatible uses in an industrial area to have those things. And we we convinced the state of Oregon Department of Corrections that it would be better for them than to be in a neighborhood with kids riding bikes and going back to school, school buses, and all the traffic and stuff that goes on around residential areas. That's not something the Department of Corrections wants next to them either. As opposed to up here, or certainly because this is now just developing, up here there's mostly high security warehouses or high security businesses where everybody who's working there is wearing an ID tag. And, and there's not average ordinary people just wandering around shopping or something. So it's hard to blend in up there if you're, if you're not supposed to be there. What else was I going to say? Oh, the other thing that was a benefit to the Department of Corrections was access to I-5, because look at, here you can come off of I-5 and go down Day Road and you're there. From here, when they were looking at this one, and I think they didn't admit to it early on, but it occurred to them later, they couldn't, remember we didn't have Beckman going across the drink here, across the wetlands. We didn't have Barber and that bridge coming across here. The only way to get to Villebois or Dammasch was down Wilsonville Road and make this hairpin turn at Brown, which they couldn't make with the prefab cells, prison cells that they were having to bring in. And they couldn't get them under the railroad track. If you come down Graham's Ferry, that's a low bridge. And so they were stuck.
The cells are essentially pre-formed concrete, so they're a certain size, and you would hit the railroad track in the underpass there.
They told us afterwards, they kind of admitted to us afterwards, once we were on the same side, that they were relieved to not have to figure that out because they didn't know what they were going to do with.
So it turned out that they built Coffee Creek across the railroad track from the Morse Brothers aggregate plant.
Oh, yeah.
Which saved millions
right here
in the construction. So it was actually, I hope that's an accurate statement, but it was something which actually worked to their benefit. But what happened to us politically is we all of a sudden changed from being a community trying to stop a prison, our community, to having a community put at Coffee Creek. And we had a lot of opposition from Tualatin. And so the mayor of Tualatin would come to Salem and say, no. I mean, the argument was, don't let Wilsonville put their prison in Tualatin, was the argument that we heard. And so the mayor of Tualatin and some of their city folks and our ORPS people and any of you community members would stand at the velvet rope. Yeah, Wilsonville wants the prison, right? There's our one of our many
with the asterisk,
materials here.
But only at the Day Road site.
Yeah. So that wasn't done by the city of Tualatin then?
No, this was us, prepared by City of Wilsonville.
Back in the day, we could send in notes to legislators, and then they would come out of the chambers and talk to us at, in the lobby, which is what lobbyists theoretically do. And so, they would come out, and I would be toe-to-toe with Mayor Ogden, and Mayor Ogden would say, wait a second, here our point of view, this is what Tualatin thinks. I'd say, excuse me, when you're done with Mayor Ogden, come on over here, and I'll give you Wilsonville's point of view, So it was, I think, pretty hotly contested, but eventually we had Senate Bill 686, which was an expedited prison building process bill, which we lobbied successfully to get through. So it wasn't just that we picked the right spot, switched the deal, but we had to actually go sell it to the legislature. And so the city did that.
And the other legislative piece that, because I was a neophyte in the legislature, 97 was my first year as mayor. So I know from nothing, I'm dependent on him. But was that first session in 97, where we're fighting the Department of Corrections and the governor's office, we were the darlings of the Republicans.
Yes.
And it was hard to get an audience with any Democratic legislators because they were hanging with the governor. And then in the 99 session, it had just switched.
It was switched.
All of a sudden, the governor's on our side, the Democratic legislators are with us, and the Republicans don't like us. And here we were. The irony is, I felt our position had never changed.
Yeah.
In other words, we were willing to have a prison if it was in the right place, if it was in a place that made land use sense. We were not saying it shouldn't be here. In fact, I had written editorials saying, I agree, it needs to be in the Portland metro area. Wilsonville is excellently positioned to host it because of our location next to the freeway and this much industrial. But it can't be in our last piece of good residential that we've planned for.
I think that the thing that was true throughout the process was it was popular with the people of Wilsonville. And that what really mattered to us was not whether this was a Republican idea or a Democratic idea. It's about our community, and it should be the community that we want. And that's a principle I think that has gone with our legislative program ever since I've been involved with it.
Yeah.
I mean, today, we're talking to legislators in Salem about things that will mean a lot to the future of our city. So having a voice in this process and making sure that the grassroots is supporting what we're doing is exactly what is successful here. So I just want to throw that one in.
And so let me see, what else did I have on here? So then moving on along.
I would like to stop and give you folks a hand because we knew things were going on. I got interviewed by the news one time with my little kids out on the playground at a school, and they were saying, what do you think about having this prison? I said, we could stand here on the playground and see it right over there. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
A great community takes work.
Well, one of the other things I had written
Thank
in
you.
an editorial was we would be objecting to it if it was a big high-security intel plant because it's in the wrong place. It doesn't add to the neighborhood. It detracts from the neighborhood. Any big high-security building there would have been wrong at Villebois. And any of you who have been there would understand that. It was too big of an opportunity to have a really fine neighborhood for us to pass it by. But if you have a question, someone wants to ask, maybe they would just want to ask you.
I seem to remember that about 95 timeframe, both parties were kind of big on closing state hospitals, and which has kind of led to the situation we have now with homeless people camping on the sides of the road.
A lot of things.
Was the closure of Dammasch related to that as well?
Well, it was a national trend. It was a national trend, partly pushed by the promise of medication. We wouldn't need people in hospitals because we could medicate them. But that didn't work out so well.
Well, and also medication. There's a lot of thinking about mental illness and using medication for folks that you would otherwise institutionalize.
But we had been, and I kind of skimmed past this, the closure of Dammasch was traumatic for the community. Not only did we have a lot of people employed at Dammasch, we had grown up with Dammasch, and or a lot of us had. Our parents had worked there over decades, and we were concerned about the patients. And everyone who was part of the employee system was family. The employees' families were worried about the patients because there wasn't. That's why it took them 2 years to close it. Because the first 100 patients or so, they could place pretty easily, medicate them and get a halfway house or whatever. The last ones were very hard because they were very fragile individuals with who needed a lot of care. And in the 6 months or so after it closed, there were multiple cases where mentally ill people were shot and killed in Portland or Oregon City or somewhere. And
We have a question.
yes,
Stand up. Yeah.
Stand up.
Yeah, there we go. The all.
You indicated that in about 1993, 1994, Wilsonville annexed the hospital. What does that mean
Yeah.
that they annexed it? What does that mean?
Thank you.
we annexed it. We brought it into the city. So before that, well, the hospital, of course, came 10 years before we were a city. So that's why they were a wholly self-contained kind of development, city of its own. But by the time things were failing at Dammasch in terms of their own infrastructure, and I think at least that's what was presented to us. They needed absolutely to get on city sewer, which by that time we had.
So does an annex mean they now have access to municipal services versus you're on your own?
Yeah.
So I think that's maybe the question is what does annex mean?
Yeah,
But it was
yeah.
a state
Hanson, I'll get the
institution.
mics for you if you raise your hand.
Yeah, it was a state facility, but they didn't have the ability, to do their own sewer, and their water was failing as well.
So the state had to agree to the annexation?
Well, they were requesting it. They made the application. In fact, the very first city council meeting that after I was appointed and knew from nothing about city anything, was when we were deciding if we were going to annex the hospital.
But annexation is a city function, not a state function.
It's a city
Go ahead, we have a
function, yeah.
follow-up?
We annexed the city
So just as a follow-up.
to the hospital.
You made it sound like the city was planning all along to take the Villebois and make that a residential area, but and then the
No.
earlier part, you said we were kind of blindsided that they were closing the hospital
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
So if they hadn't closed it, where would we have put the residential in Wilsonville that is now?
Probably would have been Frog Pond eventually.
Thank you.
But when we heard they were closing is what motivated us to get something planned, because we had just annexed it. It was part of the city. Frog Pond wasn't. And so a bunch of things kind of fell in line. But we did need that property and it wasn't just Dammasch. Villebois is a whole lot more. What's the acreage of Villebois? Do you know? The mayor probably knows.
Around 600 acres.
Because Dammasch was 200. There was 200 acres, and Graham Oaks was 250. And other pieces have fallen off here and there. The other commitment that we made early on in the Dammasch area master plan was, you notice the mental health department was part of that planning effort. So our commitment from the beginning was to housing for the mentally ill and developmentally disabled was the term they used. So we were committed to integrating housing at different levels of support for mentally ill within the Villebois system, and
And NAMI was part of our lobbying coalition. So we had, was it National Association for Mental Health as one of
Yeah.
our partners
Yeah.
as we lobbied it in Salem.
And we committed to at least 10 acres of Villebois being for mentally ill.
Correction,
Hey,
it's
but we-
500 for Villebois, thanks to pamphlet media is already.
Okay. See, the mayor's
Mayor
supposed to
corrects
know
us,
these
500,
things.
not-
500. So
500.
Dammasch was only 200 of that 500. So
Okay, we have a question here.
Well, there was also the Callahan Center.
yeah, the Callahan Center was another
Right.
piece. Altogether,
It was 500 acres, that whole.
500 acres
Yeah.
with the whole shootery, the sewage treatment plant, which was just south of the Callahan Center, the all of Dammasch and that part going north. But let me see. I just put this together today, but
We had to get the state then to sell Villebois, and had to work with
Oh,
the Department
yeah.
of Administrative Services. When at first they drug their feet, and we had to say, no, we don't like the next idea you have either. So let us please sell this, which we did for $13 million or something.
Yeah, I think it was 13
And then
million.
that's, the developer of Villebois bought that, and that's how Villebois happened.
Yeah. The state wanted to the state initially was thinking, this is after, when we're working on Villebois now, the prison has been cited, but the state was thinking that they would make a lot of money, see, because they're looking at the end deal. But the state is not a developer, and they don't know development and or what's required of it. So we had a master developer in Rudy Cadlub, and there's a lot of things. You've got to pay to get. We kept trying to explain this to DAS, to the state. There's a huge investment that a developer has to make to make it work. They've got to get these big sewer lines over there. We need a road across we need to connect Beckman to Twos. We need to get Barber in there eventually. All of these things have to happen, and the development has to carry it. So the state finally saw that they didn't want to be in the development business, and they sold it for the 13.
So in working with Rudy Cadlub and laying this out, I did some historical research for him about what an appropriate name was, and we came up with Villebois. That's a silent E, folks, okay? And the village by the woods, and it's totally a marketing thing. There is no history that's involved with Villebois, just like Charbonneau, just so you know. We chose that name because of marketing.
I have a question regarding, I think, the last slide.
Oh,
That's okay.
Okay.
wait a second.
I have to say I'm here to learn about Villebois because we moved to this area a little over a year ago. And I, being the research nerd,
Oh, good.
went
I got some
online.
jobs for you.
I went online and I read all of the, I was going to use the word propaganda, but that's not right. Publicity.
The marketing.
About your marketing, I'm sorry. About Villebois. And I came here with the idea that Villebois was as close to a quaint village with retail and restaurants and pubs and all sorts of baguette boulangeries that I could walk to from my morning. I kid you not. It's on YouTube. And then we got here.
Yeah.
And I've been looking for them for a year. And I can't find
Well,
them.
I can explain that.
I see the marketing worked.
Yeah, that's marketing for you.
So where did everything kind of go?
Well, I
off the
can.
scale? Did you actually have a master plan?
Oh, yeah.
Did
This is
anybody adhere to it?
yes, but
I keep looking for the community pool, but you have to be in the right HOA to attend the community pool. So
I don't know about the pool
confused.
business, but I can tell you about the commercial piece, which is not much different than Charbonneau. We went into this with our eyes open. Charbonneau has the same issue with their village center, that it's been very hard to keep it going. It's buried in the center of the development of Charbonneau, and unless you know where it is, it's hard to find it. Even if you're from there, it's easy to drive by it. It should have been up front at the entrance of Charbonneau, so that most people would be going by it on their way on their way home. So we knew that was a mistake. And going into this, the plan, we had multiple plans, variety of plans. But, this is Graham Oaks, and Graham Oaks goes way on down here to Wilsonville Road. And the David Leland, a national level, especially commercial consultant and developer, said, your village center will never succeed if you don't put the main road through here. Have it not be Graham's Ferry, and it needs to come down here from Tews and go through the Graham Oaks and all the way down to Wilsonville Road by Wood School, or what at the time was, it would have come right through what is now Boone's Ferry Primary, a major road. And he was convinced that the only way to have a vibrant city center here was to have this big thoroughfare coming through. And we already had a lot of community pressure to protect Graham Oaks, which was then called the Wilsonville Tract, and I'll talk about that another day. But so the community was not willing to go there, and neither was I, frankly. So we knew going in that was potentially a problem, and then we have been working on different strategies to beef up the center, the village center of Villebois. That's the tall vertical housing tax credit. See, the mayor knows it.
Just late in the day.
Vertical housing tax credit that would give people tax credits for building with retail on the street level and residential above. And I think those plans are underway. At some point, you see they're not built out at the village center. So hope springs eternal, but we knew that was a danger of Villebois. It was getting a vibrant village center. If you weren't going to have anybody but the local neighbors going there, you kind of need some through traffic. Now that's entirely different than the plan for Frog Pond, because Stafford Road is running straight through Frog Pond and straight through the area where they will have a little village center near where the Grange Hall is, or in that area. So now you have not only the people who live in Frog Pond going to that little village center, but everybody coming down Stafford, and that's a lot of people. So you don't have to live there to use those shops.
Would you please go back a slide and show us on the big map where this place is?
Where which place is?
Villebois.
Villebois is this purple guy.
Okay, thank you. I thought so. Just checking.
But, I mean, here's the other thing. Look how similar it is to Charbonneau. So here's Charbonneau down here. They're kind of similarly shaped, too. But, yeah, that's them. And you're right. This was the Callahan Center. This end of it was the Callahan Center. It came along much later after the Dammasch portion. And,
Charlotte, did you want-
can see here, this is all Graham Oaks. So it would have meant running a road all the way down here to Wilsonville Road.
Charlotte, you might want to mention the various uses that have been discussed over time about the Callahan Center. So at various times, it has been various things, including a movie studio at one point.
Yeah, sort of a movie studio.
Yeah.
But similarly with the, I want to call it the Wilsonville Tract because, whoops, this one. The Wilsonville Tract, which is now Graham Oaks, it was proposed to be the regional landfill. Before Metro had proposed it as the regional landfill before they decided to go to, where did they go?
Out in South.
There's another good idea from
Eastern
outside
Oregon.
the city.
It's Arlington. It's Arlington, yeah. And then they made a deal with Arlington, and we're trucking all of our trash. We're mostly on trains to to Arlington rather than here to Wilsonville. But at the time that they were considering it, which was in the 70s maybe, no, there wasn't much going on here, and they thought, well, this is in the middle of nowhere. No one heard of Wilsonville. So, so yeah, that was one of the things. It was considered for 2 or 3 other prison things, one for a juvenile prison, one for a previous women's prison. It was proposed as a golf course and housing. Oregon Gardens.
Oh, yeah, the Oregon Gardens.
And we supported that proposal for Oregon Gardens to be there. But what did we not have? Water.
Yeah.
What's a garden need? Water. So they went to Silverton where they had a ton of water.
But they also gave them tax benefits.
Yes,
that
and
we-
free water.
That we thought were excessive.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. Now I've completely, what I was going to show you on that previous, on that these is just how similarly we're, maybe you could, yeah, put off the light for a second. This is 88 and 2022. This is Dammasch and the Callahan Center, and you can see here's where the Callahan Center would be, but how similarly we laid this out. So there was a huge effort made to try to take advantage of the existing streets and especially the existing street trees and not just lay out a whole brand new grid of something. So Villebois, several of the entrance roads, well, you can tell this street coming along here, when you come in, you can see the size of the trees when you come in on this street. Charlotte Lane, that one, which is down here, same thing. They preserved as many trees as they could, as well as many clumps of trees as was practicable. And so there was a lot of effort on the part of planners to take advantage of what was there. Now, the hospital building itself, 400,000 square feet of building. There was always the hope that, you can turn that on probably again. There was always the hope that, that we could save it and reuse it. Reuse parts of it for something, an apartment building, this, that, the other thing. And Rudy Cadlub, who owned it at that point, he tried several different things, but that thing was built like a brick. Well, it was.
Yeah, it's like a fortress. Yeah.
And
complete with morgue.
Yeah. He said he was using it for his offices when they were building Villebois, and so he would try to take a wall down here or there so he could have a larger office or a conference room here, and it would take him like a week just to get a section of wall down. It was so. It was cement on cement on cement, and it was laid out in such a way that you couldn't, as were the floors, so you couldn't run the plumbing, the electrical. It was they finally just gave up on it.
Anybody remember the name of the movie that was shot at Dammasch? Bandits, yes,
Bandits.
Right.
Yeah, Bandits with Bruce Willis.
Well, it was Billy Bob
With
Thornton.
Bruce Willis and Billy Bob Thornton.
Yeah, Bruce Willis.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a good movie to watch because they have a significant scene there at the water towers, the base of the water towers. And you can see the water towers, and you can see in that movie that Boone's Ferry Primary is under construction at the time. So yeah.
We have a question over here.
Loud.
Go ahead.
First of all, I don't know what the Callahan Center is. I'm kind of a newbie to Wilsonville. And secondly, was the Department of Land Conservation ever involved in Villebois?
No, they owned Graham Oaks, the Wilsonville tract. That was, when the state surplused that, they were going to sell it, and that's when there was the possibility they would sell it for a golf course. And a lot of community people and people in the region, from Portland and wherever, said that's too nice of a piece of property to let go for that, and the state should not sell it. They should turn it over to Division of State Lands, which they did. I mean, somehow Division of State Lands acquired it from mental health. I don't know for what.
The Callahan Center was occupational therapy center, and
Yep.
the state went to the program called SAFE now, the SAIF program. So the state's idea of how to do occupational, therapy and that kind of thing changed. So that's why it became surplus.
Okay, my second half of that question was the Department of Land Conservation, the State Department of Land Conservation. Were they ever involved as an entity? And maybe that was just with the local planning staff?
I don't recall them being a part of anything.
Okay.
Well, and because it was going to be urbanized, primarily, so, right?
But
and
certainly the
annexed.
land
So,
board,
yeah.
again, I'll do that time after next, with regards to the Wilsonville tract, which is what it was called before it became Graham Oaks, because then Metro acquired it from Division of State Lands. So we worked to keep it in state ownership so that Division of State Lands had it. And then we had to work like crazy to get it out of their hands and into Metro's so that they could make it a regional park. So so we were very involved in the next decade with the Division of State Lands. The land board, is just 3 people. So the governor, the treasurer, and the secretary of state.
Thank you. Other questions?
I have heard that there are a couple of residential buildings in Villebois that are reserved for people who were in the hospital there. Is that right?
Well, they're set aside for, there's all different kinds of facilities at Villebois. Single-family homes with, that are like halfway houses that only have 3 or 4 patients or clients there, and whole apartment buildings. So, but they are set aside for what was called the mentally ill and developmentally disabled, and some of them are under the care of some agency or another nonprofit or whatever. But somehow they qualify for this level of subsidized housing, which has different levels of staff support. Some of them have a lot of staff support, some of them very little. So depending on their independence.
Questions? Okay.
It's a good thing we hired this guy with the mic.
I just wonder why, maybe you can explain a little bit. I've seen all of the vacancies in Villebois, for example, both the commercial sides, this other woman talked about. Mm-hmm. Isn't there something that the city could do to penalize the developer for not, making the rent cheap enough for somebody to go in there? Because, the arguments I've heard is your business can't survive because it's $10,000 a month for a tiny space, and how can you make a business thrive there? But if the developer was paying a penalty for not fulfilling his promises and leaving the place vacant, it might incentivize them to do something like that. And similarly, I've heard that there's a lot of houses in Villebois that commercial speculators buy up and leave empty, hoping that the prices will go way up. Couldn't there be some penalty that says, no, we want this space utilized for housing, and if you're going to do that, you're going to pay a penalty for it?
Thank you.
I don't know. I'll have to pass that idea on to the mayor. And the city council.
Hold on, we have one other question here, but Mary, did you want to?
Well, I would say, we can talk about that. I don't want to take over this presentation about how to operate, how to get those spaces leased. But just briefly, the developers those apartment buildings that have retail in the base floor have changed hands several times. They're like fully amortized, and they're usually owned by out-of-state landowners. And we look back and see some things they could have done differently. So we have what we have right now. Going forward, there are some new buildings to be built in that village square that do have retail in the base, and we've come up with some ideas where they could be live workspace to try to make them flexible, and maybe we would come up with some incentives. But we haven't taken the tack of getting into fights with business owners yet. I haven't seen that that's been popular yet. So we'll maybe have a session on that at the city sometime, because everybody does want to know. And then the last thing, I have never heard about this thing about vacant homes in Villebois. I walk around there all the time. That's a news to me. So if you know about it, you can call and let us know.
Great. We had a question.
Could you talk about the development of Villebois and the recession and the different developers that came in and that whole history?
Well, part of that I wasn't here, so because I was on the county commission and gone for 6 years from the city, so I'd probably have to pass at the time of the recession when things slowed down. I was aware that when things slowed down all over the place, they didn't slow down as much in Villebois. Villebois still kept limping along at a greater rate than most housing developments, but it was tough all over on that.
We have, just over here, before your comment, we have our former city attorney, Mike Koloff here.
Oh, see, I didn't even know he's here.
By the way, he deserves a big hand,
I
think,
should
for his
have,
great career with
if
the
I
city.
know you were here, Mike, I would have introduced you.
Yeah.
Well, I think Charlotte indicated that this was over a 20-year period, and during that period of time, there were different economic circumstances that came about. There were two major developers that started out with Villebois, East Side and West Side. On the east side, the developer during the recession went into bankruptcy, and so we had to negotiate. He had to give up the properties that he had options on, so we did a lot of negotiations to keep Villebois going, and we were able to do that. Some other developers came in, and Villebois is actually in different sort of subdivisions, and so as you went along, we had lots of issues of infrastructure, which developer and which subdivision, if they're on one side of the street and the other on the other side of the street, how the sewer lines would hook up and all those sorts of things. We had a lot of issues that we had to work through on the mechanics of infrastructure, and as I said, I think I modified each of the original development agreements maybe 8 to 10 times over that period of time because of different people coming in, and of course the school district, we had to change where the school was going to be built because of infrastructure issues, but that all worked out. But we had a development plan there as well. Lots of different things occurred, and maybe Charlotte's going to get into this later, but on the prison and the water, we were able to negotiate a $10 million from the state of Oregon toward our water treatment plant, and that would help get the water going up to the prison. It also helped the whole of Wilsonville. So there's just a lot of things that tied in. And then maybe one last thing is that Charlotte and our city manager at the time were really visionaries, because Villebois was built as a transportation location. And that's why you have the commuter rail coming in, easy access for people who live in Villebois to go out to different jobs, and then also different people coming in from different locations to jobs in Wilsonville. So it was all planned with the transportation as a regional transportation and a regional development for that. So there's a lot of visionary look at this, and Greg did heck of a lot of work at the legislature for us.
See, it was called the Dammasch Area Transportation Efficient Land Use Plan. And it's very fat, very fat. But yes, it's a good thing to point out, a development that goes over 20 years not unlike Charbonneau, there are lots of developers come and go in that period of time, and things change, and it takes some effort to keep the back end following the rules that you set at the front end.
Charlotte, we have a question.
Yeah.
Actually, just a bit of context for those of you that I think are questioning. I moved here about a year ago, came from Pearl District in Portland, and was on neighborhood associations and a master association board. And the issues that you're identifying here are the same ones they're struggling with there. With a daytime population of around 14,000, a nighttime population of 21,000, it is not enough to support most businesses that aren't well entrenched, like a Starbucks, the kind of businesses that you want. So this population in Villebois is not going to be nearly enough on its own to support that. And you know, cautionary tale of things like mixed use, flex space, loft, daytime, because the key word is activation. Activation during day, activation during evening. It just unfortunately doesn't bring itself there, and they're struggling with the exact same issues that you're identifying here.
Right, and we're a much larger city in the day than we are at night. So we're the opposite of a bedroom community. We have, you know, 20,000 people coming in to work in the day and then going home. So
We have a question up here.
So is the Coffee Creek considered beneficial to the state as well as to Wilsonville?
yeah, I think, well.
We have an advisory council
Yes, I should let
here.
you should say something. But I need a mic.
Okay, a mic. Certainly. Thank you.
Unless I want to cozy right up to her.
No, it's quite all right. Here we go. Here, I'll hold it. Thank you.
Well, probably a large percentage of the women arrive from their counties for only 13 months, because if they stay in their county, if their sentence is for 12 months, they stay in their county and they don't get any programs. So if their sentence is for that 13th month, then they can come to Coffee Creek and have programming. So that's a huge benefit. Then a large percentage of the women have children, and a large percentage of the women come from the metro area. So this way, their families can come visit them. Statistically, a men's facility, they're called adults in custody. They're not called inmates, so I'll keep saying AIC. So in a men's facilities, traditionally, families will follow the AIC to their facility. Women, the families don't follow the woman to the facility. So it's important that it be close enough where the woman AIC's family can come to them. And then as you were telling us about the intake center, that is a very novel thing that hadn't been happening in Oregon until about a year or two before the facility was made. So every man from every county comes to Coffee Creek first. And it's more than just the two things that you mentioned about
The mental evaluation and physical.
Yes.
Intake, yeah.
They also are evaluated for all their tattoos to make sure that they're not housed with somebody that there would be danger. They also have a lot of teeth problems because of drugs, and so they've got to stabilize them so that they don't have to keep going in and out of a hospital. They don't want them, once they get in a new facility, they don't want them to move along. It's really a good location. Another thing they're tested for is if they have aptitudes. A lot of them have professional certifications, inmates coming from all the counties. And so they want to make sure that if they're journeyman in anything, they can be moved to a facility where they can keep up that certification. It's very holistic, and you would be proud.
I think we are proud. Let's give her a big hand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
For all of her work. Because I after the prison opened here, like 2-3 years after, I don't know if this was your recollection, but the person in charge is called what?
Superintendent.
The superintendent, who was in Bandits. So, yeah. Oh, what was her name? Joan Palmatier. She plays a bank teller in Bandits. So yeah, definitely watch that movie.
You all are going to do great at trivia after this, aren't you?
Anyway, she said, told me at some point that they were a little bit overwhelmed with community volunteers because it took a fair amount of staff to train and supervise the volunteers, and could we just hold down a little bit on the volunteers? So we were kind of initially overwhelming them with helpfulness, but yeah, I think we consider it a good, and for the reasons that Mr. Koloff was saying, it brought infrastructure out there. Improvements to Day Road, improvements to bring sewer and water out that far. I mean, that was beneficial to the city and sets us up for more of that industrial development out there.
I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions.
Just one quick question. How many, that's 500 acres, is that right, Villebois?
Yeah,
okay.
Give or take.
How many, and I don't know how to ask this properly, how many residences or taxable entities are there? If you're talking density, as you were showing in the earlier sketch, I think Villebois is listed as village. The other areas have 2 to 3 per acre, 1 to 2. So what's the density of Villebois?
Do you know, Mike?
I think if you include the multifamily units, the total is about 2,600 units.
2,700, she thinks,
2,700. Okay.
dwelling units. Yeah, he retired a little while ago. So whatever, I think we're about done. I was just going to say, obviously we're right up against this issue. We were in a full-on water moratorium, and I'll just leave you with this one. At the end, when I was working with the governor and Department of Corrections to get Senate Bill 686 or whatever it was passed to site it at Day Road, I was sequestered in the back room of the back of the governor's office with the head of the Department of Corrections, who was Dave Cook. And because we were waiting to testify and they didn't want us wandering the halls. And they could have him wander the halls.
That was my job.
Wander.
And then we would talk on the phone. I'd say, okay, here's where they are, here's where this is, and this one is. And here's where we go to talk to them and that kind of thing.
I was back there for hours at a time waiting for the hearing, and so different times I was on the phone with Mr. Leo here, trying to set up the campaign for the water, because we were already had a campaign going to get to the Willamette. And we were figuring out phone banks with the rest of the city council, and we were going to call up and so I'm on the phone back and forth with him, and Dave Cook is over here reading a book or something. And at one point in between, I said to Dave, I know you didn't really think that the water was a problem for you, but trust me, you should be worried. We're worried. We're worried on your behalf. And as it turned out, we won that election. But at that time, we were really up against a wall. And it wasn't just the prison and Villebois. It was Fred Myers who was stopped from developing. Fleer was, pretty much everybody. We were in a full moratorium.
We have one more comment here, Charlotte.
Yeah.
So when the Department of Corrections builds a prison in a community, a prison advisory committee is required, and they select, the mayor and the superintendent select 20 people from the community to be on the prison advisory committee. And we would like to bring our complement of members back up to 20. We're at about 10 now, and so if anybody's interested in that capacity, just let me know.
Great.
Yes.
And also, I think you can let the city staff know that as well.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Well, yeah, because Bill Evans is back here who does that little thing, the Boone's Ferry Messenger. So we could probably twist his arm into putting some sort of announcement in there. Yeah, twist his arm. There he is. Yeah, yeah. So anyway, this is for the next time around. So, and we already did questions, so now we don't have to do that. So thank you for coming.